Hey, hello there. Welcome to Talking with Tony and happy Thanksgiving. It is my pleasure today to welcome back a member of our TWT football panel, Kevin White. Kevin, where are we today?
We're in my office, Brunswick, Georgia.
What are your Thanksgiving plans? You hanging around Brunswick or are you headed somewhere else?
We'll end up in middle Georgia, Dodge County, at my wife's
Yeah.
family's. We'll go there for
Didn't
the
those
day.
Troop didn't those Troop County Tigers end up with in the region with Dodge County one time? It seems like they were there with them and some of the other teams around that area, like maybe a little bit after we were done or so.
Did they? Did they drop that far down in classification? I think Dodge County is a smaller school, like 2, 3A.
They were playing like some of those schools around Americus and
We
they may
played
not
Worth County and those guys. We were
playoffs.
regular with them. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember playing Americas quite often in basketball, and we couldn't run with them.
What about Crisp County? Did you ever play Crisp, CRISP County?
I never played them in basketball, but I think our football team played them several times. May have been playoffs or something,
Okay.
so they got into the
Yeah.
playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Uh, well, is there anything you want to say to Donnie Laney? He trolls the show. You know, he's big, he like you. He's a huge UGA guy. He trolls the show. He hates my Buckeyes. I don't know why that is. Who could hate Keith Byers, Chris Philman, Chris Carter? When I started pulling for the Buckeyes, took some online stuff with from Ohio State during COVID times just to be able to say that associate myself with the school, but when I was a kid and I was watching like those games in the late '80s with those players, who could dislike those guys? And for some reason, he can't stand them.
And yeah, I mean, I get where he's coming from, right? As a diehard dog and an SEC guy, I have to channel my inner Laney every once in a while too, and say, especially when you start talk show guys and all this stuff, and they're hyping up the Big Ten and this and that. And traditionally, I mean, the Big Ten's been a great conference, but here as of late, I kind of feel like that all the conferences, you've got 4, 5, 6 teams at the top, and then the rest are just kind of mediocre. So I get where he's coming from, but to hate on them, I mean, I don't do that. I mean, I respect their program. They always have great athletes. They recruit against Georgia. They recruit against Auburn. They recruit against Florida. They recruit against the big dogs in the college football. And they win a lot of those battles. You know,
I was talking with Danny on the phone yesterday, another member of the panel, our lead expert, if you will. Although as I look at the records, none of y'all really qualify as being lead experts right now. As I look at the one-loss records, we'll just skip over that last part though. But I was I was telling Danny, I think that Auburn has really hurt themselves in the series with Georgia the last 20 years. That when Pat Dye left in the 92, I think it was the year 1992, that Auburn Georgia game was more meaningful to Auburn people when Dye was the Auburn head coach. Of course, he played for the University of Georgia. That's one factor. Another factor was when Saban was hired at Alabama, Auburn people just freaked out. Always were worried about what's Alabama doing, what's Alabama doing. It's all about Alabama and other rivals at the time because we played Florida a lot then too. Florida was that's what they used to call it, Amen Corner. Florida, Georgia, and Alabama were often the last three games. So they kind of like lost interest in the Auburn Florida series, the Auburn Tennessee series, and the Auburn Georgia series to focus on Auburn Alabama. The other thing was the arrival of Kirby Smart and the dominating ability of him to recruit, and the fact that I make that a two-part deal. Not only his ability to recruit, but football in the state of Georgia is so much better than football in the state of Alabama and most other states. It's better than Ohio. Ohio used to be a big time football state. I would take Georgia football against anybody right now, high school football, including Texas and California. And some people say that may be a reach, but the fact is, Kirby gets his people now, and he gets the best of the best, and he can get them from the state of Georgia and everywhere else. And I think the dominance in the series is probably more likely to contend. And one of the factors is how good Georgia high school football is.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, you look at college football as a whole. I mean, all across the country, the number of athletes in college football that are from the state of Georgia that are at other schools that Kirby didn't keep home, that Tech didn't keep home. You know, yeah, I mean, we recruit right there at the state lines. You got guys in Alabama, at Auburn, you got them at Clemson, you got them at South Carolina, you got them in Tennessee, you got them at Ohio State. You've got quite a few all over the place. So I was watching high school football this past Friday, on Georgia Public Broadcast and through some other apps that I have. And I was simply amazed at some of the talent out there. There's tons of guys out there that are D1 ready right now to play. I mean, you just look at their movements and stuff and their ability. Now, whether they know the systems or not yet, that's what they got to learn. But their athletic ability, they're ready. You know,
What's going to help Auburn moving forward is the absence of Saban, and then the state of Alabama. I've already seen it. This recruiting class coming in, Auburn is getting better players in state than Alabama is for the first time in a while, and I think that's part of the Saban factor. Now, look, once again, football in the state of Alabama not as good as football in the state of Georgia, but that doesn't mean there's not some still exceptional kids that can play all across the country in given schools in Alabama. That's certainly the case. We got to talk these rivalry weekends. I think I enjoy this weekend as much as I enjoy 95% of the bowls. If is that fair to say? Do you kind of feel similar?
absolutely. I mean, especially since the playoff era, right? I mean, once we went away from like the BCS and all that, now we have a playoff, whether it's 14, now 12 team, it's turning out to be an absolute fiasco, right? But yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the rivalry week is just good old fashioned hate week, right? I mean, it's the teams that they've been going at it for ages, and so you get a lot of excitement out of these games, even if even if you got two teams that are four and six, right? Playing each other. I mean, it's a good old fashioned football game, just gridiron, get in the dirt and battle, you know. And so I have
I
fun
think
watching.
I think when I look at one of the games that we'll be discussing is Arizona and Arizona State. It was just a couple of years ago. I don't know what Arizona beat them, but it was ugly. Arizona State was just not competing. And then last year, Arizona with Jed Fish at the helm, who's at the University of Washington now and took a lot of players with him to the University of Washington. Jed Fish really turned it on for Arizona, had a lot of momentum in that program. They beat Oklahoma in the bowl game. There was so much excitement. They got the quarterback, Noah, back, and they've got McMillan, the wide receiver, back. But a lot of other kids did go on and join up Washington. They've had such a miserable year that in 2 years, it's flipped to where even though they're playing at Arizona this weekend, Arizona State is 8.5 point favorites.
Yeah, I mean that was one of those that I texted you last night. I was going to have to stay up and study on these things. That was really one of them I was looking at, and I kind of leaned more towards the home team in this one. They won what the past three or four, right?
Mhm.
Arizona has, even though Arizona State on paper is the better team. They're hot right now. They just come off a good win. Um, but I still think, as big as that spread was, that I mean, 8.5 points. It's not a huge number, but I think that Arizona's going to make it a fight. I think they'll keep it close. Just
I think they
just
will
straight
too.
up out of being that rival.
I'm with you on that game, and I think you're absolutely right because I believe, Kevin, that since they're not going to be going to a bowl game and that's the last appearance, I still think there's a lot of pride there when it's your last appearance, especially at home, and you get a chance to play that rival. And I expect that to be a game. So that wasn't even like that's not I'm all out of order here, but I tell you what, we'll go ahead and just call it that we've talked about this. I'm on Arizona plus 8.5, and you are as well. So the Arizona Wildcats plus 8.5 against Arizona State.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better right there that you're on the same side as me because my picks of late haven't been that wonderful.
But you You were doing really well until 2 weeks ago, and that's when it sort of left you.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what happened. I mean, I thought I understood what was going on in college football, and just like this whole fiasco in the playoff bracket right now, it's just up in the air, and I kind of feel like that's where I was trying to make these picks, and I'm just like, what is going on? Am I in bizarro world? You know?
Well, I don't know if this will make you feel any better because they're not exceptional themselves. But Stormy's only one game ahead of you, and Danny's only 2 games ahead of you. So you're only 2 games out of second place.
Right. Well, that's not saying much for our panel, is
No,
it?
it's not. But I was talking to a friend of mine who knows a lot of professional players, and I was talking to him last week, and he told me to a man, every single one of those professional players have told them that they are down this year. I don't know if that's the transfer portal coming in or name, image, and likeness, but it wasn't just college, it was also pro. Those would not factor in pro, but he said every one of those professionals were down. And where I was about 22 games ahead of 500 this point last year, and I think I finished 18 or 19 ahead. I'm 5 games over 500, but it has been an utter struggle to get there. I mean, I have been just, around 500 the entire time. So none of us have done real well. And if you look at our 5 stars, I believe we're 13 games under 500 with our 5 stars, and yet I'm one above. So you can look at the four of y'all and see that the 5 stars has been an issue. And that gets me to my next thing because you and I are on the both same 5 star this week. Michigan is playing Ohio State. Ohio State is 20 and a half point favorites against Michigan, which is insane. But we both have the Buckeyes.
Yes, and that's what that's what I say. I hope that I haven't jinxed you in that one because my 5 stars have not exactly been 5 star, right? Um, and I think, and going back to what you're saying, those past couple of weeks where I had those down weeks, I think I kind of pinpointed it. I let a little bit of my heart and emotion get involved instead of truly looking at the spreads. But if you look at Michigan as a whole this year, they are down, right? I mean, they have athletes, they have the ability to play with Ohio State. I just don't think they've got that gel as a team, you know, to get it done. And then if it makes you feel any better, every time, every time you put Ohio State on the sheet to pick, and I've gone against them, it's bit me in the rear end, right?
Oh,
So I think we're going to change that this week. I'll go with the points, give the points with Ohio State, and they're going to cover it. You know,
Michigan's credit, not only are they the defending national champions, but they have won this football game the last 3 years. And I was very upset 2 years ago when they went to Columbus and they won. And I was more upset last year, even though I felt like Michigan had the best team. I think they had the best team in the country and they won the national championship. But Ohio State up in Ann Arbor was driving to win that game down 6. And Ohio State did not lose a football game all year until they went to Ann Arbor. And I told people here on the show that I felt like Ohio State had the second best team in the country last year, but they didn't get in the college football playoff because they lost that game to Michigan. There is a lot of payback that Ohio State people want. And mentioning those things are important. The thing that's probably most important to me was the cowardice that Harbaugh showed 4 years ago when he wouldn't even play the game. He said he had too many players that had COVID and they skipped the Michigan Ohio State game. When Ohio State in the same year played for the national championship that year, Ohio State and Michigan was like a 500 type team. I want that said in the locker room before, not that this team needs any more motivation, but there's
that's
not
right.
many of them here left from then. But I want it mentioned because I felt like that was one of the lowest things anybody could do is cancel the biggest game of the year.
Well, I agree with you. I mean that was total fiasco back then, 4 years ago. COVID was a fiasco in its own, but it was no excuse. We everybody in the country fought hard, more so than just football, but simply for freedom, not to have something forced down our throat, to be allowed to play football. And then for Harbaugh to back out of the game in that respect, it was just, I don't know. I don't know if classless is the right word, but it was. It was mighty close, right?
Well, not only have Facebook, but when you're an Ohio State person and you're on your social media, you're supposed to block out the M, everything that you say this week. You never show the M in anything like any sentence. You put red over your you put that Ohio State scarlet, if you will. This will be a challenge for Jake. He might have to find some old newspaper clipping, Jake, because I don't know if there's footage from a 1950 football game. But Ohio State and Michigan played in 1950 in Columbus. It was the so-called Blizzard game. Kevin, Michigan won 9-3. Michigan punted, I believe, 24 times. They had 27 total yards. They didn't pick up a first down, but they won the game 9-3. They blocked four Ohio State punts. I think Ohio State punted 21 times. Once again, final score 9-3. The story is told that some of the times those teams punted on first down to each other because they just couldn't see the field. I don't know if Jay can find any footage from that, but I want to get your thoughts on what that must have been like. And then in 1973, there was a famous incident, and this game was in Ann Arbor. But Ohio State came out, and this is on YouTube. And when they came out, they tore down the coveted Michigan banner. That the big blue banner that the Big M Club supports you, that Michigan's been running, under for forever. And at the time, the Michigan play-by-play announcer, Bob Hoover, he was a legend. He's been dead a long time. He died, I think, probably shortly after that. But he said he was complimenting the Buckeyes because they had this amazing linebacker core, including Randy Gradishar. And then they had John Hicks, an offensive lineman who was one of the first guys selected in the next year's draft, offensive lineman. He was being so complimentary of Randy Gradishar and the other Koger and one other linebackers that come out. And then all of a sudden, those guys start, maybe not those guys, but the Buckeyes start tearing down that banner. And it completely changed. And he said, all Michigan people from Lake Superior or Lake whatever get up. They had the unlitigated mall to like do this. I mean, it was fabulous. And they ended up tied. I believe they tied 10-10 that day. We'll probably get some footage on that. But what would that have been like to play in the snow? Do you think in a blizzard where you just couldn't even see in front of you?
And man, I couldn't even imagine. The closest thing, I think we talked about it on a show previously where I was talking about quarterback of Wyoming. Now, Bill's
Jake,
quarterback.
yeah, yeah,
Um, you know,
Allen, yeah,
yeah, and so
Josh
Josh
Allen.
Allen. Yeah, and I was talking about that when I was out west, and I was going through this little town in Wyoming, and it was in the fall of football season, but the first snow had come like in late October, early November, and I'm driving through and I'm watching these high school kids over here on a practice field, and there's about a foot and a half of snow on the ground, and it's like 12 degrees outside, and they are just knocking the fire out of each other. And that's why I had a newfound respect for those guys out west. I was like, they are tough as nails, buddy. If they can get out there and hit like that in that cold, soaking wet in a foot and a half of snow at practice, I mean, I can't even fathom, you know. I mean, we used to go out and play in it, snow skiing and stuff like that, but we weren't out there hitting, you know. And
Sounds
it's a different kind of cold too.
Sounds pretty inspiring. We usually start with our college selections, and we did a couple, but we'll do it like on a chronological. This week's a strange week because there's so many college football games on Friday, but there's also three NFL games on Thursday, the traditional two Thanksgiving games that Detroit and Dallas get to host, and also a game, I believe it's the Packers and the Dolphins late. I did select for the panel the Bears and the Lions because the Lions have the best record in the NFL right now. This is an old rivalry. These teams have met each other several times in these Thanksgiving Day contests in Detroit. Detroit's favored by 10 and a half. You're 66 and 77 on the year, 5-8 in the five stars. So this could be worse on those five stars. Bears or Lions? How do you see this?
Well, I had to look on this one too, and so the Bears have won three of the last meetings on Thanksgiving between them and the Lions.
Okay.
Um, However, they're going to be road weary on a short week, playing on Thanksgiving in Detroit, and I think the Lions are probably the best team in football right now. You know, when they have everybody healthy, which is questionable. I mean, their top receiver, what's his name, Amron St. Brown. I can't even
Mhm.
say his whole name.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Um, yeah, he's questionable. You know, he had a little bit of a knee injury this past week. So with everybody out there, I think the Lions just have too much firepower. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think the Lions are just top notch. You know, I don't think Caleb and the Bears, though they got my dog DeAndre Swift. I mean, he's going to get his yards. I think he'll do fine. But I think the Lions just are too much for the Bears in this game.
Okay.
You know,
I can't fault you there at all. When the Lions lost Hutchinson, I thought that defense was really going to take some steps back, but they haven't. I mean, and he was a superior defensive player. I do because of who you just mentioned, Swift in the running game. I think that the Bears can potentially go on some long drives and keep that Detroit offense off the field. I think Detroit wins the game because I think they're the best team in the NFL. They have the best record in the NFL. I think a lot of people want to see the Lions and the Chiefs play each other in the Super Bowl, either the Chiefs Eagles or Lions Chiefs. People seem to love Mahomes. I think that would be very attractive if that happens, if that comes to fruition. I'll go with the Bears plus 10.5 here. I'll go with Chicago just from a standpoint of it is a short week. It's a short week for both teams to prepare, and maybe, just maybe, the score might be late, 30 to say what, 30 to 16, 30 to 13, something like that. And the Bears might get what looks like a meaningless touchdown, but it's a touchdown that gets them within the number. So I'll go with the Bears. We got to go back to college now because we're going chronological order here. Friday, there's two games. One game that you'll be really, really interested in. Let's knock out the other one first. Oh, Colorado favored by 17 over Oklahoma State.
yep. I looked at this one a good bit too. Oklahoma State kind of having a down year. They came out early in the season. They were projected to be a lot better than they are, and they started out that way. And then they started having a little downfall. Um, I think they've somewhat not necessarily thrown in the towel, but I think the coaching staff has decided, all right, we're going to put some of the younger guys in, starting with their QB. You got the freshman QB and Smith out there now, who's who's shown moments of greatness. Last game, 300 and some odd yards and a couple of touchdowns. Even though it was in a loss. I mean, he's shown some promise, but it looks like they're more interested in starting to develop their guys. On the road at Colorado, you got Travis Hunter, Heisman favorite, um, as well as Colorado's defensive line. I think they're just better at a pass rush and against that freshman QB. How is he going to stand up to that on the road, in Boulder? And so I lean, it's a lot of points. Colorado burned me last week, didn't give much of a showing, but I think that's going to be one of those things where Coach Prime has gotten the boys' head back on straight, where they kind of looked ahead, kind of felt like I forget what his term was. I saw what he said. He's like, I think we
Stupid.
got,
Yeah, we're playing stupid or something.
yeah, or even like we got a little full of ourselves or
Uh,
whatever, something to that nation, to that notion. I think he's got these guys straightened back out, and 17 is a lot of points, but I'm gonna go Colorado minus 17.
okay.
You know,
I was well, I'll say this, and I took Kansas last week and they delivered, but Kansas I know this sounds strange to say about a 5-6 team, but that
mm-hmm.
Kansas team right now is playing as good as anybody in the country. And that's hard to say and not laugh because they're 5-6. But in the last 3 weeks, they have beaten a very good Iowa State team easily. They went
Mm-hmm.
to Brigham Young and stopped their dream season. They did to Colorado what they did last week. And I just hope they win this week and they get in a bowl game, or this will be a shame to be on the outside looking in. I got to get your opinion too, because you and I usually see the world the right way. I picked Travis Hunter to win the Heisman before the season started. I even made a little wager on that I'll make chump change. It won't make much, but I'll make a little money on it. I have a problem though when they were getting beat as bad as they were getting beat last week at Kansas, and he does the Heisman pose twice. Are we missing the moment here? Are we missing the picture here or not? Something didn't sit right there with me with that.
That type of showboating has never sat right with me. But look who his leadership is. It was
Yeah.
Prime, right? I mean, he was the ultimate showboat, right? So I think a little bit of that's rubbing off from his coach, right? So, but we see that throughout sports nowadays. You know, the celebrations in the end zone and the different dances and the stuff. You know, I mean, I'm not for that. You know, I'm always, all right, celebrate, but on your way back to the sideline, high five your teammates, do that kind of thing. Get on the sidelines, you can do all the celebrating you want. But doing your little shows in the end zone, I don't even like it in pros where they don't get a penalty. You know, it aggravates me, you know. So in that situation, if I'm a Heisman voter and I'm looking at him, I'm looking at his overall resume of what he's accomplished. It's hard to deny that, you know, because he is an outstanding athlete. But correct me if I'm wrong, is it not? It's not only the resume of what you've accomplished on the field, it's the type of person you are, is what the
That is part
Heisman
of it.
was
You are correct.
traditionally built upon, right?
Character. Yep.
On the character. And so that shows a little bit of lack of character to me. You know,
I agree.
um, it's one thing if you're holding that trophy or and you're now on a Heisman House commercial and you want to do the pose, right? But before you've won it, I mean, that's a little arrogant.
Yeah, and a blowout loss. You are correct. Now the game that you do care about in Athens, Georgia wins this game. They're in the college football playoff, and the experts believe they've got a fabulous chance because they've got the Bulldogs listed as 20-point favorites.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of points, you know, in this rivalry game, especially as well as Georgia Tech is playing. I'm going to give Stormy a little bit of credit here before I crush his hopes, right? Um, you know, Brent Key's done a fabulous job with this team. The quarterback play has been good. He's mobile. He's done a great job. They're running backs. I mean, Georgia proved last week against UMass that when they gave up quite a few yards on the ground and it looked like we couldn't tackle the girls team. You know, it looked pretty rough to start with. Now, UMass was just playing out overmatched. They didn't have the depth. That's why Georgia ends up pulling away and dominating that game. But it does make you a little nervous from the defensive standpoint and knowing how well Georgia Tech runs the football, you know. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Kirby's going to have these guys up for this game. They're not looking past it. They're not looking at playoff. They're not looking at SEC championship. They're looking at Georgia Tech for numerous reasons. One, like you mentioned, I think it's a must-win game for them, um, just to keep the playoff hopes alive. Right? It takes the pressure
You
off.
say that, but if they win the SEC championship game, they're automatically in anyway.
Oh, well, and that's what I say. It kind of takes added pressure off of the SEC championship,
Yeah,
right? There's
yeah,
there's already pressure in that game. It's one of the ultimate venues, one of the ultimate
sure.
platforms to play on, right? And so there is pressure there to begin with. Now, if you have that added pressure of I have to win this game to make the playoff, I think by beating Tech, it takes that pressure off because there is still a chance of them making the playoff, even if they don't win the SEC as a three-loss team. You know, now I think that's all going to be determined of who they play and what the margin of victory either way is, right? If they win, they're in, of course, and
Mhm.
that's the old adage in football, right? Just win, baby, just win, right? And you don't have to worry about anything, just win. But you know, say they play Texas again. Okay, Texas beats A&M, and they play Texas again, and they play a really close ball game, and they lose by one score. Right? I think that Georgia still has a good argument to be in the playoff. Now they lose by three scores or better to Texas. I don't know if the committee is going to be quite favorable to them.
Well, I'll
You
say
know,
this: they played a worthy schedule this year. There's been some years where you could say, man, Georgia had a an easier path, but this year was not one of those years. They played a worthy schedule.
yeah, they well in most categories that you look at, it was the number one strength schedule in the country, right? And there's something to be said for that.
For sure.
Kirby, he said it numerous times. He's not going to shy away from those games. Those are the type of matchup he wants to play in. That's why athletes come to Georgia is to play in those games. Um, got good news. Is Colby Young is back on the practice field. I doubt he'll be playing at the Tech game. Just because he's been out for so long with his off the field problems. That he's got cleared of. Um, Hopefully, we'll have him back for the SEC championship and possibly a playoff run. So that's a good thing. And I think it helps just having him out there with the other receivers at practice.
Sure.
You know,
All right, so you go with the Bulldogs, and the rest of the panel does too, except for Stormy, and that's Georgia -20. I got to get you to give me a quick thought on South Carolina at Clemson. Clemson favored by 2.5.
yeah. South Carolina probably one of the hottest football teams in football right now. They're playing. Their defense is playing lights out. You know, I think this is going to be. I would wholeheartedly take the under in this game if I were putting money down. I mean, I think it's going to be a battle back and forth, tight ball game. The big question mark for me is can South Carolina's offense keep up with Clemson?
Mm.
I think defensively, South Carolina is going to give Clemson fits, right? Um, the South Carolina's defensive line is just incredible. They're pressuring guys in the backfield better than anybody in the country right now. I mean, it looked awesome. I mean, they did against Alabama, almost won that game. The past few games they've just been ridiculous. And so in that was one that I tried to not to let emotion get involved. Um, So I lean to Carolina with the points at 2.5. I think it's gonna be a close game. This is one that it was a coin flip for me, but I lean more towards South Carolina.
All right, we're running a little low on time. What about Auburn at Alabama with Bama favored by 11.5 and Bama coming off a devastating loss at Oklahoma?
Yeah, that was a fairly easy pick for me. I would love for Auburn to go in there and win that game, but it's in Tuscaloosa, and traditionally Alabama takes a loss. The next week, the team pays for it. Their opponent pays, and so I go with Alabama -11.5.
I understand. John's 5 stars, the Florida Gators -14.5. I will say that all of the panel is on Florida -14.5, but I'm going to circle the wagons with the Seminoles. Florida State +14.5 here. Tell me why you think the Gators blow out the Seminoles.
Well, if you look at the box scores and the stat lines, Florida State has scored 18 total touchdowns this year. Florida has scored 37, more than double, right? Um, DJ Lagway back on the field. When Georgia Florida came to pass, I think if he stayed healthy in that game, that it may have been a different outcome. They were ready to play Georgia. With him on the field, he's a difference maker. And FSU has just been an absolute dumpster fire this year. I just don't see it. I mean, Florida's going to be pumped for this in-state rivalry. They're on a high right now, on a win streak. I mean, I think they just get business done.
Yeah, I can see it. Let me run down everybody's picks since we have about 3 minutes. And if I get done in time, we'll get a final thought from you. I'm 34-29 in football this year, 7-6 with the 5 stars. I'm 11-5 in soccer. I'll give you one soccer pick. Brentford this weekend, -0.5 goal against Leicester City. Brentford needs to win by 1 goal or more. I'm 11-5. I've got the Bears on Thanksgiving Day +10.5. So we hope Chicago can be competitive with Detroit there. My 5 stars, the Ohio State Buckeyes, -20.5 against Michigan. I'm on the Arizona Wildcats +8.5. I like Florida State in the Battle of the Sunshine State. Florida State +14.5. And in the NFL, I have one pick, the San Francisco 49ers +7. Danny is 68 and 75, 5-8 with his 5 stars. He's got the Bears +10.5. He's on Oklahoma State +17, Georgia -20, Clemson -2.5. He likes Michigan. He likes the underdog +20.5. He's got Arizona State -8.5. His 5 stars, Auburn +11.5. Florida -14.5 is his in the Florida State game. He goes with the Gators -14.5. In the NFL, he likes the Steelers +3, the Seahawks -2, the Buccaneers -6, and he's opposite of me with the Bills -7. The entire panel is opposite of me. John is 71 and 72, 4-9 with the 5 stars. Lions -10.5 is his pick for Thanksgiving Day. He's got Oklahoma State +17, Georgia -20. He likes the Clemson Tigers -2.5, Ohio State -20.5. He has Arizona State -8.5, Auburn +11.5. His 5 star is Florida -14.5. In the NFL, the Steelers +3, Seattle -2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers -6, and Buffalo -7. Kevin, he's 66 and 77. Kevin, you're 5-8 with 5 stars. You like the Lions on Thanksgiving Day -10.5. Colorado to blow out Oklahoma State, Colorado -17. You love your Georgia Bulldogs -20 against Georgia Tech. You got South Carolina in the game for the Palmetto State, South Carolina +2.5. You're a 5 star, and man, I hope you're right about this one. Ohio State -20.5. You've got Arizona +8.5. You and I against the world there with that selection. Hope you're right there about the Wildcats. Alabama -11.5. I can't quite endorse that one. Hope you're wrong there. And you've got the Florida Gators, like the rest of the panel, -14.5. The NFL selections: Pittsburgh +3, the Jets +2, the Buccaneers -6, and the Buffalo Bills -7. Stormy is 67 and 76, 5-8, and 5 stars. He agrees with the Detroit Lions -10.5. So everybody went with the Lions -10.5 except myself and Danny. Oklahoma State +17, Georgia Tech +20. He believes the Yellow Jackets keep it close against the Bulldogs. His 5 stars, Clemson -2.5. He likes Michigan +20.5 in that big game in Columbus. He's got Arizona State -8.5, Alabama -11.5, Florida -14.5. In the NFL, he takes the Cincinnati Bengals -3, the Seattle Seahawks -2, the Panthers +6, and the Buffalo Bills -7. Fair to point out, he was the only person who took the Bengals against that game in Steelers, and that's a rivalry game in itself. Also, Stormy, Kevin wants to relay a message to you: to hell with Georgia Tech as he gets ready. I think that's clean old-fashioned hate there for the game between Georgia and Georgia Tech this weekend. I hope everybody enjoys their games this weekend. Those rivalry games are big. May your team win, and we'll see you next time right here on Talking with Tony. My thanks to Kevin White. My thanks to Jake Barton. See you next time.
And we can see over there on that eastern sideline right now, the 2 Ohio State captains, the elected captains, are Hare, the second-string quarterback, and Middleton, one of those fine linebackers making up the trio, Middleton, Hagel, and Gradishar. Here they come, Hare, Middleton, and the Buckeyes. Boy, look at Hicks. He's an acting captain today. Hicks is the acting captain, John Hicks. And they're tearing down Michigan's coveted M-Club banner. They will meet a dastardly fate here for that. There isn't a Michigan man in the stadium who wouldn't like to go out and scalp those Buckeyes right now. They have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to tear down the coveted M that Michigan's going to run out from under. But the M-men will prevail because they're getting the banner back up again. And here they come, the maize and blue, taking away 105,000 fans. Told them to tear down the flag, so Bo said the heck with the flag now, and they're cheering and jumping up and down in front of the Ohio State bench, and now they're coming underneath the M. The M Club supports you, Michigan, and so does everybody from coast to coast. The coast of Lake Michigan to the coast of Lake Erie. What a football game we're going to have here this afternoon.